And Bina Shah, as you know, is a Pakistani English language writer, well known. She's the author of 4 novels, as well as collections of short stories. And Slum Child has been a bestseller and translated also into Spanish, German, Danish, Chinese, Urdu, Sindhi, and Italian. Wow. She's also a contributing writer for International New York Times, as well as Dawn in Pakistan, and for Granta, The Independent, etc. Bina has a degree from Wellesley and from the Harvard Graduate School, and a new novel has recently been published, about which they are going to talk about now. Victoria Schofield is not a stranger to Pakistan, if I may say. She's a writer and a BBC commentator who has written extensively on South Asia, acknowledged expert on the Kashmir issue, and author of Kashmir in the Crossfire and Kashmir in Conflict. Victoria is going to be the moderator for this session. So let's begin without further ado. I would please request the audience to switch off or put your mobile phones on silent. Thank you. And the session is about an hour long, and we will have a question-answer session at the last 10 minutes or so. So enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me from where I'm sitting? I hope so. Well, once again, I'd like to say how delighted I am to be in Karachi at this 6th Karachi Literature Festival. I came to the first, and I've been seeing the festival grow, and it's absolutely wonderful to be here. And so I'd like to thank Oxford University Press, and particularly Amina Saeed. I'm also delighted to be here in conversation with Bina Shah. We met last year at the Karachi Literature Festival, and we've also met in London. And I was privileged to write an endorsement for her book, which I really think is a most wonderful piece of literature as well as storytelling. And without any further ado, I'm going to actually sort of throw the ball into Bina's court and say that as a political commentator and a journalist with a good track record in commentary, where does the novel writing side come from?
Well, the novel writing side is the creative impulse. The political commentary, and I really don't consider myself a commentator or a journalist at all, but I consider myself the accidental journalist, really. But the novel writing comes from the creative impulse, which I think all of us have in us, but most of us are not allowed to express it. Luckily, I came from a family in which storytelling was very much encouraged. I mean, from the beginning, I was read to by my parents, and my father would make up stories for me at bedtime. I just became more and more interested in reading and the world of fiction. And that's a passion that stayed with me throughout my teenage years, my college years, so on and so forth. And with the love of books was always the desire to write. So this novel and all the ones that have come before it was born of that impulse.
Well, this novel is very, how I found it's on sort of several layers, and I think almost it repays reading twice, because you read it as a novel and then there seems to be a lot of hidden meaning in it. And for those of you who haven't yet had the opportunity to read the book, I just want to bring out some of the strands. We've got Ali Sikandar, the journalist, Amina, who is his boss, I suppose we should say.
Yeah.
Very politically correct. She's female and she's his boss. And then
at the TV station, where he works for a TV station.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've got Jahangir, his work colleague, and Haroon, another work colleague. And most interestingly, slightly pushing the boundaries, we've got Sunita, his beautiful Hindu girlfriend.
Secret girlfriend.
Secret girlfriend,
Nobody
indeed.
knows they're going out.
So this is a scene that's already been set in the novel, but overlaying that, and what I found fascinating myself, is that we are very clearly rooted in Sindhi culture, yes. Because you read a chapter and then you have a flashback. And there are a number of flashbacks, I would say almost matching the number of contemporary chapters. And the book is set between October 2007 and December 2007, which, as we know, was a very important and poignant chapter in Pakistan's history.
That's right.
So the first vignette we go back to is the famous and possibly apocryphal Pekavi,
Yes.
I have sinned. And what I'd like to do now, before dealing with the contemporary part of the book, is to go back to some of these flashbacks.
Sure.
There's 1843, there's 1846, there's 1827, 1895. We move our way forward within Sindhi history. And perhaps we could start with Charles Napier and Sindh. I mean, how did the particular episodes you pulled from history come to you?
Well, they were a combination of two things. Of course, the famous stories that we all know. Pekavi is a story that everybody knows, that when Charles Napier conquered Sindh, he sent this. Actually, this is not even a true story. It didn't actually happen.
It's apocryphal, but it's a very good one.
It's actually based on a cartoon that came in, was it Punch magazine?
I think it might have been Punch, it was.
In the UK, a satirical magazine and political magazine, in which there's a telegraph that comes from Sindh, and it says Pekavi, and Pekavi is, of course, the Latin for I have sinned. And Charles Napier was said to have sent that telegraph when he conquered Sindh. And I found this so amusing, the pun, and I thought, I have to start with, what if this actually happened? And we hear the name Charles Napier, but who was he? What were his motivations? You know, who was he as a person besides the momentous figure he was in Sindhi history? So that's where I start with so many of these flashbacks, because we all read about these historical figures, but to fictionalize them and to turn them into characters that serve my needs as the writer of the novel, I found that very entertaining to do. I mean, I really amused myself when I was writing a lot of these chapters.
Yes, and I think for me it adds depth to otherwise it's sort of on a one-dimensional contemporary story, but then you've also got the history, because we then have Shah Abdul Latif, who of course is, you know, an iconic figure in terms of Sindhi history.
And even before him, I start with I then move to a story about the Zinda Pir.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Because I wanted to ground the contemporary story of the 3 months from October to December 2007. They happened, and they were so fast, and they were so intense, that if I only told that story, I felt that the novel would not be grounded. What I really wanted to do was anchor it in the in-depth history of Sindh through these vignettes, so that you could get a sense, the reader would get a sense of the contemporary story actually having very, very deep roots. It didn't just come out of nowhere. Sindh itself is a very rich culture, a very rich land, and nobody had ever written about it in fiction before. So I had all these ideas in mind. I wanted to fictionalize the last 3 months of Benazir Bhutto's life. I wanted to capture the 3 months of that intense time when she returned, and there was the People's Resistance Movement and the Lawyers' Movement, and Musharraf had imposed emergency, and there were all these things going on. But I wanted to anchor it as a story so that it would not just float away in a kind of fiery intensity, in these very earth-bound tales of this land's history, this land's people, and the Sufi influence, because we say that Sindh is the land of the Sufis. But what do we mean by that? What does that actually mean when we say, oh, the Sufis were saints and they brought love and they brought peace? But how did they do that? What did they do to specifically capture the heart of the Sindhi people and bring Islam here and whatever else that they did? So those were my motivations in bringing these early historical chapters. I wanted to talk about Shah Abdul Latif because he is known as the Shakespeare of Sindh and the foremost Sufi poet of this area. So he's in there, and he also happens to be a very, very distant and not direct ancestor of my family. So I was doing a lot of things. I was trying to pay tribute to all these people. I was trying to pay homage to to the saints. I was trying to set down some family history. I was doing a lot of things at once. And that's so much going on in a novel that I had to take a very chronological way of doing it so that I could keep track of everything.
But here we come up against the difficulty, of course, with all fiction. If you're basing on fact, how difficult, how easy was it to stick with the fiction, embellish the fact, particularly with some of the historical sections where, for the non-experienced reader, you might not know where the lines have been blurred.
Yeah. It was very difficult. I didn't even know where the lines were sometimes.
Yes.
Because again, these historical figures, for example, the Pir Pagaro of two peers ago, the one who was executed by the British, has become such a legendary figure. What is the fact of his life? What is the fiction? For the people that were really dead and gone, it was a little easier because I didn't have to worry so much because they were so legendary that I could pretty much make up anything I wanted to. But I did my research, I did my reading. I think I researched and read for about 6 months before I even wrote one word of this novel. So I was very steeped in Sindhi history, and I read a lot of history books in my father's library, and I got the facts out. And I knew, okay, Shah Abdul Latif, for example, he lived in a certain town. He married, but he never had children. He traveled a lot through the Thar Desert to Rajasthan. He was very influenced by Hindu philosophy, so on and so forth. So I had the bare bones of the facts, and then I could put the flesh on.
Yes. Well, one has, with all fiction, historical writing, one has what we call poetic license,
Yes.
which I think one's allowed to use. But of course, it's always a challenge. Which bits of the history did you find hardest to write?
I think the hardest bit to write was emotionally the death of Benazir Bhutto, or at least her last days, because we all know what's coming. And yet, when I actually finished that chapter, I have a chapter right towards the end where she's getting ready for her last rally. And I've quoted poetry that she actually wrote. And Javed Leghari, formerly of Zabist and now of the HEC, he was a boss of mine when I worked at Zabist, and he was very kind to give me permission to use her poetry. And he actually showed me her personal papers and the PPP manifesto that they were working on in 2007, and I saw her handwritten notes and in green pen. I mean, I'll never forget what it felt like to look at her handwriting. And I wrote the chapter, and when I finished the chapter that she's going out to face the crowds in Rawalpindi, I cried. I cried very much because it was so difficult to write and to know what had happened. And yet when you're writing, you're completely in that moment as if it's actually happening in front of you. So emotionally it was difficult. I think then academically, perhaps writing about people like G.M. Syed was hard because we know a lot about him as the nationalist, the fiery leader of the Sindhi nationalist movement, but I wrote about him as a 14-year-old boy, and that was the age he was at when he addressed his first political rally. But I had to get those I had to get it all quite right. I felt very obliged to make sure, because I imagined the entire population of Sindh coming after me and catching me later and saying, this isn't right, that's not right, how could you say this, how dare you say that? And then the other thing I was very careful to do was, in writing about Benazir and a lot of the controversies surrounding her life, I wanted to make sure that I dealt with them fairly, but not in a way that would insult her memory and not in a way that would insult her children who are still alive today, her family members, the people that, because the wound is still very fresh for them.
Yes.
So,
I wanted to move on also to discuss the contemporary aspect of the book, because you do have a flashback chapter of Benazir as well.
Yes.
Which, how did that come out of your
which one
sort
are
of
you
imagination?
referring to?
When she's young.
In the garden.
It's in the garden.
Yeah, after her father is hanged.
Yes.
I wanted to show her at a very vulnerable time in her life, when she's just lost the thing that's most dear to her, And I wanted to bring in the character of Ali Sikandar's father. And so it seemed to make sense to try and envision where she's, and I don't even know if this really happened or not. I mean, you were there at the time, so you would be able to tell me, was this, please don't tell me if it was terribly wrong.
Perhaps see you later.
But it was poetic license again. So I envisioned a scene where she's accepting condolences from far and wide. And so I thought it would make sense to have the two characters come together in this fictional scene.
No, it's certainly very moving. As I said, and I think the challenge, and also the challenge for the reader is the back and forward. But at the same time, you've managed to, so often we look at linear history, but here you've got the father, the grandfather, and so this brings me really onto some of your central characters, because we've got Ali Sikandar, and what I found of interest, even in the contemporary part of the book, is that you've got several things going on. As we say, we've got this secret love affair between Ali Sikandar.
All love affairs in Pakistan are secret.
Okay. Yes, well, that's another story. And Sunita, his girlfriend.
Yeah.
But equally, you've got the fractured relationship between him and his father.
Yes.
Because he has remarried. You've also got his own political beliefs versus his father's beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think you make this very clear at the beginning of the book, where you have the dialogue in the office. Benazir Bhutto is coming back in October, and Ali Sikandar is not a particular supporter,
Not
but his
interested.
father has been a very
Yes.
great supporter. So you've got the pro and the anti-Bhutto camp, so the love affair, the pro and the anti-Bhutto camp, the fractured father-son relationship, and all of these sort of come together in your characters over this period of 3 months. And equally, there's the East-West pull, because Ali Sikandar has the opportunity to go and be educated in the United States, and he's sort of feeling he wants to do this to have a better life for himself, but at the same time he's feeling he's letting his family down and his girlfriend down, and in fact, I mean, I won't spoil the story of the novel, but it has implications on the relationship with the girlfriend.
Yes.
What's the message you're trying to give with all of those different strands?
The message, what I was really doing, the figure of Ali Sikandar was inspired not by anybody in real life in particular, but I had taught at Zabist for about 4 years, from 2006 to 2010. I was teaching people that were very much the age that Ali Sikandar would have been in those years. And what I observed was how much pressure these young people were under, especially the young Sindhi students at Zabist, because they had grown up in Karachi, and yet they were carrying all their heritage and all their culture and all their baggage, really, of being Sindhis in an urban environment, in an environment that was not always friendly to them. And they got they were under a lot of pressure to prove themselves, to prove their background, to justify their backgrounds in the case of those who were the children from agricultural families, or zamindar families, as we call them. There were quite a few of them.
Yes, and in the novel, Ali Sikandar is very keen to hide his zamindar background.
Yes, he's embarrassed about it.
Yes.
He's embarrassed about it not because he's ashamed of it, but because he's just gotten so much hassle about it, which is very typical if you're a Sindhi and you live in Karachi. You get hassled a lot about the feudals and so on and so forth. I wanted to portray that pressure that a lot of these young people were under. And just the general pressure that young people are under in our society today, where everything is confused, nothing is really working very well. It's very unstable politically, it's unsafe, you can't really live a normal life. You can't go out and have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and just enjoy being young and in love, and you can't enjoy the city, you can't enjoy the things that most people around the world at this age would be enjoying. And it's difficult, and I wanted to show this particular young man making a lot of bad decisions because of the pressure. So in a way, it's a coming-of-age story as well for Ali, because he goes through a lot of changes in the book from the beginning to the end. He grows up quite a lot.
Well, it is about change, too. And again, I don't want to spoil the storyline, but what I got out of it is it's also about second chances.
Yes.
And
redemption.
It's a redemption novel, which I think is very moving from that point of view. And it's a redemption novel on all sorts of levels because of the relationship with the father and with Ali Sekander's own feelings about Benazir Bhutto.
Yes. Yes, he decides to give her a second chance. He decides to give his father a second chance. He gets a second chance. And actually, that is about forgiveness. And that's it. And I mean, the novel, I really wanted to infuse a lot of Sufi values with it. And there's nothing bigger than forgiveness, you know, mercy and forgiveness. So I really wanted to put a very strong theme of mercy and forgiveness throughout the book.
Yes, no, which I think you've definitely done. Now I'm going to read a passage, and you can prepare your answer while I'm reading it. The day couldn't be any more alluring. A lazy, long Saturday that stretched out before Ali and Sunita like a gift that would take all day to unwrap. They were at Masood's beach house on French Beach, prettier and better constructed than most houses Ali had seen in Karachi. Electricity and a generator, a flat-screen TV, and a huge glass-paneled lounge that made you feel like you were in a ship because you could only see the sea when you looked out of the windows. Servants were cooking barbecue on a grill in a pit outside, fresh fish, crabs, prawns, and Masood was plying the guests with all the liquor they could want. Sunita didn't drink, but Ali took an ice-cold beer and strolled outside to view the scene on the beach. How long does it take you to write that sort of composed paragraph, which has got everything in it?
About 10 minutes.
Only 10 minutes?
I mean, because the scene is already composed in your head.
Is it drawn from real life?
We've all been to the beach.
We've all been to the beach.
But I have never been in a hut that nice. I've been in a hut that was good, but it didn't have a flat screen TV. I mean, I embellished a lot in my head. But I'm sure those kinds of flats exist. And beach houses, I'm sorry, not flats. But you're asking me a really difficult question.
I know.
Whenever you ask me, how long does it take, how long, it's not about the length. I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, that's why I said it's a difficult question.
Size doesn't matter.
I think what I'm trying to find out is that, do you sit and stare into space?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I chose that particular paragraph because to me it's a very complete, scenic paragraph, and I agree it's a slightly easier one. But are there times when literally the words don't come?
My family will attest to this. This is what I do 90%. 10% I'm typing. 90% of my time I'm lying on the couch and complaining about something or the other. The weather's awful. I have allergies. I'm hungry. I don't like what's on TV. Or I'm just like staring out of the window and feeling like, why am I alive and things like that. But while you're doing all those things, your mind is working in the background. Or even in the shower. I mean, I think of a lot of things to write while I'm taking a bath. So that when you actually sit down to compose, it's already there. It's already there, and it's like you're transcribing it. It's not like writing a business letter. It's not like writing a report. It's something you go into a kind of a trance, and you don't know how long you spend when you're there. But when you come out, it's like you come out of deep water, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm here. Wow, okay. It's kind of like that.
Yes. I mean, do you feel the characters themselves take over, and you almost have to do what you feel they're going to
No, I'm God.
work out on the page?
They do what I tell them to do.
We had Mrs. Saigal yesterday, and she was very much saying that the characters run all over the pages and she can't control them.
That's when you're not. That used to happen to me, but as you write more and more and more, you're in control. You know what they're going to do. You make them do what they're going to do. I used to say things like, "Oh, I can't control them," and they have minds of their own. But that's a conceit that we have as writers to hide what's really going on. Our God complex, really.
Yes. I mean, so do you plan the book out before?
This book was the most planned of anything I've ever written. I spent 6 months researching, and then I spent a month plotting. And I used mind mapping software. I don't know if any of you have ever used this, but it does. You don't So previously, my books I would plan in a linear way. And this one, because there were so many things going on, and it is a non-linear book, and it's experimental in that structure, I actually had circles and ideas shooting out of all the circles, and then I would draw lines and connect them and so on and so forth. When I had that structure, then I sat down and started writing. Then I plotted linearly, in this chapter this is going to happen, in this chapter this is going to happen. But this took a lot of structure. It was very complicated.
Yes, I think that was really what my question was, is the length of time it takes thinking about writing it compared with the actual writing.
Every book is different because you evolve as a writer and your technique evolves, and every book you're trying to do something different. Every writer, as they evolve and they push themselves to more challenging work, they take up different challenges. If you just write in your comfort zone, it will show. I really pushed myself with this, and I had it was a risk. I felt I was taking risks, literary risks with this book that I'd never done before, and I was pretty scared.
I was going to say, were there times when you thought, well, actually, this is not the right tack, maybe I shouldn't put in the, I should just stick with the contemporary history? Or
No, actually, my editor, when he accepted the novel, he was considering the novel, he said, perhaps we should take all the historical scenes out, and I was very quiet, and I was like, if you think so. And then he said, no, okay. He went and conferred with his other colleagues and then came back and said, no, we need to leave them in there. They're the heart of the book.
Yes,
and
that's interesting.
Okay, because that was a lot of work. And I felt that those chapters were very rich, and I felt the book would be weaker without. Sure, it could be a quick little novella, but for it to really be a novel and for it to really have worth, it needed those chapters.
So I think certainly your reviewers have appreciated the content.
Some of the readers are just like, what the hell is this? I don't understand this. I don't like it. It's too difficult. So it's it's challenging.
Yes, I would say it's not one of those things that you would call as a swift read.
No.
Which part, I mean, you've talked about the very tragic end, and I don't want to spoil the end of the book, or indeed let you know what happens, because I think we'll still go out and buy it. But which part of the book did you feel went best in your own mind, that you're proudest of?
There's a chapter called The Game of Kings. This chapter describes the last night of Pier Pagaro's life. He's waiting in the black cell to be hanged at dawn. And most men, I think, would be very frightened. They would pray. They would spend their night repenting, crying. He spent his night playing chess all night with a jailer. Well, we don't know who he played chess with, but I'm assuming it's a jailer. I wrote the story of that night from the viewpoint of the jailer, a young boy from Hyderabad who doesn't have much opportunity, so he becomes a jailer instead of going to school or anything. But he is precocious. He plays chess. And the last night of Pier Pagaro's life, he says, I hear you play chess. Come and play a game with me. And they play chess all night, and the Pier beats him every time. Every game he wins. That's recorded in fact. And I just thought this was such a fantastic story. I had to put it down on paper, and I wrote it, and it sang. It just sang.
It does sing. I'm going to treat the audience to a little section, if I may.
Thank you. Yes, please.
The game went on, end and beginning, losing all meaning. It was one long tournament that seemed to last from sunset to sunrise. As a last resort, Ahmed, this is the young jailer, decided to try the strategy of passed pawns, creating a complicated skeleton across the board. But the Pier created so many holes in the chain that in the endgame he could bring out his king and move it to the center of the board. From there it became the strongest piece in the whole game, threatening all Ahmed's other pieces, until Ahmed threw up his hands in defeat, and the Pier, without a word, began to set the pieces again in their starting positions. A slight glint of amusement illuminated his darkened eyes. It's a lovely section. Do you play chess that you were able to create it so well?
My father taught me how to play when I was 8, and I suck. I am terrible at chess. I don't have the patience for it. But I actually went online and read about chess strategies. And I was able to pretend that I knew something about it.
The book is also a very poetic book, and I think that's part of its charm is that it is poetry, and I thought this might be a good moment to pause and have some singing
Yes.
of the poetry.
Because I can't read, I've got a bit of a throat ache, but I have a treat for you. There's a young man here by the name of Nasir Sumro, and he's going to sing us a kalam of Shah Abdul Latif. And please come on the stage, because I really dedicate this book to Shah Abdul Latif.
And then we'll have the Q&A. I
Yes,
think this was a good
yeah,
moment, as
absolutely.
we've been
So
talking
please
about
tell us,
singing.
Nasir, what are you going to sing for us?
Yes, hello.
Is that working?
Is it working?
Can we have this? Excuse me, is this mic
Or,
on?
hello. If somebody has, yes, it's working. Well, there are two songs. One is of my own, which I have written in English, and I'd like to dedicate it to Ma'am Victoria and Vinasha, all-time favorite. Vinasha is my writer, because I have always fond memories of her writing Shah stories and all that. Anyway, the song is in English, and then I'll just recite Why of Shah Abdul Latif Bhai. Those days, those days, when I had in your heart a deep space. Those days, when I had in your heart a deep space. Those days, you're my love, my life, my ecstasy. You're my center of gravity. Those days, Yahud kurena baseran ji. Thivi di saakha saveran ji. Aarat ladi hua chedoa. तू छोड़ न पायल पेरन जी. Those days, my love, now I can't make you mine. Gone are the days of laugh, dance and dance. Those days, Yeah. So. This Wahi is of Shah Abdul Latif Bhai, and I have met Vinasha's father, and I have really, I'm really lighted. Anyway, the song is just, I like to brief it to you, that it's romantic tragedy of Sasui and Punu, and it's sung by many of the good singers, and I'm really flippant one. Sura inhaya sari sari ho jevya halya. Sura inhaya sari sari ho jevya halya. Ho vana vana hai thya virah paivarya Allah. Sura inhaya sari sari ho jevya halya. Sura inhaya sari sari ho jevya halya. Ho vana vana hai thya virah paivarya Allah. Sura inhaya sari sari ho jevya halya. Ho leda ladyaun raat bambhorama bar khani vya bari bari ho jevya halya. Ho vana vana hai thya virah paivarya Allah. Sura inhaya sari sari ho jevya halya. Ho chori chapar mein raate chadevya bar khani vya bari bari ho jevya halya. हो वण वण हेठियां विरह पई वारियां अला सूर इन्हैया साड़ी साड़ी हुजे व्याहलिया हो अदियूं शाह लतीफ़ चवे अला लतीफ़ चवे अला ओ भिट जो घोट लतीफ़ चवे अला लतीफ़ चवे अला मूसा पत पुनल पारी हो पारी हुजे व्याहलिया हो वण वण हेठियां विरह पई वारियां ला सूर इन्हैया साड़ी साड़ी हुजे व्याहलिया Thanks, man.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I think that just is sort of the icing on the cake. And now, I always think these sessions are wonderful to be a bit interactive, and we can continue chatting. But if there is members of the audience, and I see a gentleman right back here who'd like to ask Bina a question, I think we're very lucky to have this opportunity to.
Yes, and I just
to
wanted to
chat.
say that I wanted to give you that little oral treat so that you could understand, just in a different way, not an academic way, but a visceral way, take in the, okay, that's someone's phone, but the beauty of Shah Abdul Latif, and
Absolutely
know
lovely.
that that's what inspired me so much. And what made me very happy was I could see some people in the audience singing, and they know the words to this poetry. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Lovely.
Yeah, hi Bina, this is Kashif. While describing about the Benazir Bhutto or Shah Abdul Latif, you feel very much proud and you seem to be glorifying it. But while discussing
We can't
about
quite
the,
hear.
Yeah,
Sorry.
can you just-
Yes. Just
yeah, what I'm trying to say that while describing about the Benazir Bhutto or Shah Abdul Latif, but you feel so proud and trying to be glorifying it. But while discussing about GM Sayyid, you feel so scared and sensitive. So do you try to say, is he untouchable to discuss and elaborate?
No, the only reason
Do
I
you
was...
want to repeat the
Yeah,
question? 'Cause
see,
I think it was a bit difficult. for
that
people to understand.
that you noticed that I feel very proud talking about Shah Abdul Latif Benazir, but nervous, only because I wasn't as familiar with GM Sayyid as I am with Shah Abdul Latif and Benazir Bhutto. I knew less, so I was not as confident. But the more I read, then I felt, all right, I can do this. Thank you for the question.
This gentleman here, yes. You
Next.
need just wait for the mic. Will
Yeah,
you?
we're...
Oh,
I have got the
oh, he's
mic.
got the mic, and then you have the mic.
Yeah,
Yes,
we need to
thank
have somebody from OU, if a volunteer can help
Yes.
pass the mic around.
Yes.
Well, I have read a few chapters of your book, and what I feel that your selection of the episodes of history is quite arbitrary and
Arbitrary.
And one thing more that it's quite elitist, and almost all the characters, they belong to a particular clan and belong to a particular strata of the society,
Uh-huh.
and especially one you yourself belong to. How would you say to that?
Are you talking about the Zamindari class? Yeah, I knew that question was coming. Sayyid and Zamindari, blah, 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 blah. I had to write about what I know. See, they always tell you when you start to write, when you learn to write about what you know. If I write about a village woman in Sindh, yes, I can tell her story, but it's not truly what I know. And what I wanted to express was this background, this Sayyid background, this bit of history, this slice of Sindhi culture, which I feel I know best because I grew up in it. And I understand it, and I understand the good and the bad, and I understand the animosity and the understanding of it. And that was what was in my heart, so that is what came out on the paper. And I want other people to write also about Sindh and about their understanding. The more voices we have, the more people we have talking about this beautiful land, the richer our literature, contemporary literature, will grow. We don't want it to just end with a certain experience or certain people. So I would encourage everybody to pick up the pen and write if they can, their family's history, their experience, their understanding. this was my small contribution. It's meager, but it's what I could do.
I think what we're also learning here is how important oral history is then to be transmitted into
Yes.
the written word. This gentleman here, you had a question? Have you got a mic?
Can we pass the mic
Yes,
to
can we
him?
pass the mic?
Do you mind? Because otherwise, no.
Oh, you've got, okay, he's already got the mic, then we'll go to this gentleman.
All right, yeah.
Here we go, yes. Could you, yes, put it on, maybe, and yes.
Make sure it's on.
You might just like to introduce yourself.
Yes, do tell me who you are
Yes,
when you
it's
ask the
quite
question.
nice to know who everybody is.
My question is very simple. That your knowledge background is same
Yes,
and different personalities.
yes. Sorry.
And your heroes and heroine are Ali and Surina,
Well, the contemporary story.
Contemporary heroes, yes.
not contemporary. One thing you have ignored, it is my view, that one person, his name was Allah Baksuno. He was a prime minister of the Sindh. While you have not inducted this person,
Okay.
then you have
Yeah.
mentioned the name of the GMC. He was a contemporary of the
See, this is what I was afraid of.
Yes.
He has got a Islamic audience.
This is can I repeat the question for the
Yes.
audience, because I'm not sure they will have heard. The question was why, there are a number of people mentioned, but why was Ali Baksh Sumaro not mentioned, the Prime
Okay,
Minister?
Let me just apologize.
Representative of the rising
Yes.
middle class politics
Yes.
in Sindh.
I want this recorded that I'm giving an official apology for all the people that I left out of this book. And to also tell you that this was never meant to be a history book.
It's a
So,
novel.
It's a novel, and I had to choose certain characters based on what I was trying to illustrate. And can I just say at this point that what I was really trying to show, and this novel is being called a political novel. Okay, I have not used that phrase myself, but it's being taught in university in the US. It's on a curriculum of political novels. What I understood about how power came to evolve in Sindh was that it was through the Sufi saints and then through the Pirs, who were the guardians of the saints' shrines, and eventually this very spiritual chain merged with the political power base of Sindh. And so I had to stick very much to the figures that illustrated that paradigm, from paradigm as I used to pronounce it before my father told me better.
Paradigm.
So I had to pick and choose very carefully. I could not write the entire history of Sindh because I'm very ignorant on such matters. I don't even speak Sindhi very well. I could have written about Muhammad Khan Junejo. I could have written about my father. I could have written about a lot of people. But I had to really stick very closely to the mission I had set for myself, politically, what I was doing. So I hope that answers your question. And again, I'm very sorry that I missed out on Allah Baksh Sumro. Part 2, I can always include him.
This gentleman here, you have a
Yes,
question?
you've been waiting very
Yes.
patiently.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Najib Siddiqui. I am a dentist.
You're a dentist.
Yeah, an orthodontist. I make people smile better.
Okay,
All right.
that makes me smile.
Leaving the nitty-gritty aside, I am an urban Sindhi. Now that's
Oh, yes.
that's a term coined by me, I believe.
No, I've heard that quite a lot
people
before.
Must have, know, all right. But anyways, I am convent educated, being a city-bred Sindhi. I never learned Sindhi, so I learned Sindhi on my own.
Yes.
All right. When I was growing up, there was a lot of books in my house, so I studied everything. Then I came across socialism, Marxism, and I had a profound, depth, and my heart went out to my people who were poor and downtrodden.
Yes.
And I would remember Hyderabad Jadoi,
Yeah.
people like him, and now the missing persons list is coming. But in those days, we Sindhi boys used to ask each other, that, do you have a certificate? And that certificate was, how many days did you pass in jail? So was it 6 months?
What's
Was
your
it-
question?
Yeah, are you asking me how many days I've been
My
in jail?
question is, during my younger days, met with fiction, I used to study like Harold Lamb, Alexander the Great and stuff like that. There are a lot of facts with fiction
Okay.
written, like you have written over here.
Yes.
So I would be, delighted if you write a book about the urban Sindhi and what he went through, you see.
Can we move to the question?
My question to you is, why didn't you write about
Yeah.
the communist upheaval and
Part
and
3.
how they killed everybody else?
Now I have an idea for part 2 and part 3, so keep them coming. I'm taking notes.
Thank you for the question.
How come all the socialists and the communists are dead?
Yes.
Well, that's your
You-
story
al-
to write,
Also, you
sir.
could write your own novel. Get writing. There's a lady
Yeah.
there, a gentleman there, and then the lady at the back, and then yes,
A lot of how are we doing for time?
we're
by the
good.
way?
I mean, we've got another 10 minutes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
This is Suhail Bhavani. I have a simple question. Is that
They're
Could you
never
perhaps
simple.
Yeah.
Stand up so we can see you
yeah.
and
My question
hear
is,
your
what
name.
is the audience that you think you have in your mind when you are writing that novel? So what's the audience?
Everybody, all
What
of
is the
you,
audience?
But this
anybody.
is a very generic one because the language itself, it restricts some sort of an audience.
Anybody who loves literature, first of all. Anybody who wants to learn more about Pakistan. Anybody who loved Benazir Bhutto. Anybody who has an interest in Sindh. Anybody who has an interest in politics, what happened in Pakistan, what's going to happen in Pakistan. I would hope that any of those types of people would be interested in this book.
Thank you. This lady here.
Hello everyone, I'm Javeria Petiwala. I'm a student from IBA Karachi. So my question to you is that you wrote about Sindhi history and literature because you were motivated to write about it. Is there any possibility that you would be writing about the other parts of Pakistani history, like going into the depth of Punjabi literature or history or the upper parts of Pakistan? Is there any possibility for you to write a novel on that?
I mean, I'd like to say I would love to write about everything to do with Pakistan and the world and everything, but I'm one person with very limited experience and very limited life. And so I write about what I know best, and that's the best way that I can contribute to our literature. I would love to, but I think there are a lot of people doing a lot of those other regions. So look for them, seek them out, and maybe write one yourself one day.
This gentleman here had a question. Yes, you've got the mic. With the mic. Yes.
Lots of questions.
Can you?
देखिए मैं आपकी कौम का 90%
Could you speak into the microphone?
मैं अंग्रेजी नहीं जानता
अंग्रेजी
मैं
नहीं
जाहिल
जानता, ठीक है।
आदमी हूँ और आपके मुल्क का रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हूँ 95% का मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहता हूँ कि आपने अपनी कौम को एड्रेस किया है या एक मखसूस तबके को एड्रेस क्योंकि जो आपकी किताब है वो 5% के पास पहुंचेगी और 95% से आपका कोई इंट्रैक्शन नहीं होगा तो मुझ जैसे जाहिल आदमी के लिए ये किताब जो है एक ऐसी चीज़ है जिसको मैं कभी ना समझ सकूंगा ना कभी मैं पहुंच सकूंगा।
अच्छा जी, अगर आप मेरी उर्दू सुनेंगे तो आपको समझ आएंगे मैंने उर्दू में क्यों नहीं लिखा।
नहीं
मेरी उर्दू कोई ख़ास नहीं है, बहुत कमज़ोर है और मेरी सिंधी उससे भी ज़्यादा कमज़ोर
मुझे
है।
बिल्कुल डाउट नहीं है कि आपको उर्दू नहीं आती होगी, मुझे ये डाउट नहीं
बहुत
है।
शुक्रिया जी।
बिल्कुल डाउट नहीं है, 100% माशाल्लाह आप पढ़ी लिखी हैं।
जी।
जब आप फॉरेन लैंग्वेज इतना अच्छा बोलती हैं और इतना अच्छा लिखती हैं तो क्या आपकी वो ज़बान जो आपने होश संभालती सुनी है वो कब आप उससे अनजान रह सकती हैं? लेकिन मेरा मकसद
अच्छा
है-
जी, मैं आपका सवाल समझ गई हूँ एक्सक्यूज़ मी, और मैं अपने को शर्मिंदा नहीं करना चाहती हूँ मेरी कमज़ोर उर्दू से, और इसलिए हमारे पास तर्जुमा होता है तो इंशाल्लाह एक दिन ये किताब भी ट्रांसलेट हो सकता है उर्दू में सिंधी में। ये मेरा बहुत इट्स माई विश कि ये हो जाए। अगर आप भी मदद करने चाह रहे हैं इस चीज़ में तो आप मुझे बाद में बता दीजिए।
I think definitely an Urdu translation.
Yes, my mom is dying of embarrassment
This
now,
lady,
I'm
you have
sorry.
yes, you have a question there. Yes, and then here.
Hi, Bina. This is Bakhtan.
Hi, Bakht.
You talked about how authors have got complexes and
They've what?
got complexes and the characters seem to have a mind of their own.
Yes.
So now do you think you have more control and you feel like a puppeteer? more?
Yes, I'm in control. I'm God, baby, when I'm writing.
Okay, so you don't feel like a puppeteer?
I'm not a puppeteer. I'm the master.
Okay.
No, look, I mean, what can I say? I'm a writer. I'm not schizophrenic. I don't have multiple personalities going on in my head. This is part of my art. This is what I do. This is why, hopefully you read my books, because I know what I'm doing. So I do have good control over what everybody's doing. Don't worry.
Right, now we have a question from this lady in front. Yes.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
My name is Farzana. I teach language and literature.
Yes.
When I haven't read the book, first of all, and I hope this question doesn't sound too flippant. When you see the word martyr, it's associative with tragedy and gravity.
Yes.
But Bina, this is the second literary festival in which I've had the privilege of hearing you speak.
Thank you.
And this delightful thread of almost tongue-in-cheek humor comes through. You have this air of very restrained exuberance. I hope that this comes through in the book, because it would be a huge motivation to read it. The subject seems very great.
It's not a funny book, but there's humor in it.
That's
you
all
will
that's
find
required.
things to laugh about.
That's all
you
that's
will.
required.
You
Thank
will.
you so much.
Because I have a good sense of the absurd, and this country is extremely absurd. And so if you're going to write about Pakistan, you cannot keep a straight face
And
when
that's
you're
what
doing
makes you so special.
You cannot. Thank you. Yes, I agree. I think
Thank
that's
you.
it for the questions. I'm going to have to please stop
I
because
think, yes,
my
I think
chest
we are
is hurting quite a
just
bit.
out of time, but it remains for me to thank Bina Shah very much
Thank you,
indeed. I've
Victoria.
so much enjoyed doing the In Conversation with you. And again, to thank Oxford University Press and all of you for coming and attending this session. And for those of you who haven't read the book, I encourage you to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.